Hi, this is Carlos Cousins, and this is a sentence completion question. For this sort of question, what you need to watch out for, as I usually say, is yes, the vocabulary and the answer choices, but just as importantly, any words that are going to give you clues as to what the vocab should look like, so you can set up some criteria that are going to help us cross out answers that might make sense or not. So let's go ahead and approach this one together. As a small child, Jeff blank his stringent upbringing. However, it's a key word. As a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict blank. So whenever we see however in the middle of a sentence, or although, though, despite, at the beginning of a sentence, we know that the idea that's going to be introduced in the second half of the sentence is going to be inherently different or oppositional to maybe from the idea introduced in the first half of the sentence. So our first criterion is going to be that the first half of the sentence and the second are opposite. So I have a plus sign and a negative sign here just to signify that, just as positive is the opposite of negative. That is something that these pairs of vocab words are going to have to be in the context of the sentence. And since we don't have any other keywords, the other important criterion, of course, that we need to keep in mind is that the meaning is kept coherent, that what we are plugging in here in these blanks doesn't cancel out one idea of the sentence inadvertently. So let's go ahead and consider the answer choices together. As a small child, Jeff allowed his stringent upbringing. However, as a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict autonomy. So this doesn't really make sense in that allowed is an action that Jeff would be taking. So as a small child, Jeff allowed his strict upbringing. So he allowed his parents to raise him as he did. Well, that doesn't really make sense. And then, as a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict autonomy. Well, if he's the one that is allowing them to do it, there's no real autonomy there because he has the power. So this is just completely incoherent, and that's why this doesn't make sense. As a small child, Jeff deplored his stringent upbringing, so he didn't really like it. He wasn't very much for it. However, as a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict discipline. So this makes sense, and then we have an idea that is completely the opposite of the idea that follows the semicolon here. That he was completely against the way that he's being brought up, but then began to appreciate the discipline that his father had. And the meaning is kept coherent. We don't have any problems in the usage of the words. So this seems like a good answer choice, but let's move on and figure out if the others also make sense. As a small child, Jeff cherished his stringent upbringing, so he liked the way that he was being brought up. However, as a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict assertiveness. Well, assertiveness, again, is a problem of coherence. Doesn't necessarily have much to do with bringing up a child. That is an assumption, maybe a necessary one in real life, but that's an assumption. And more importantly, if he cherished his strict upbringing and then appreciated it, both of these things are positive, and you don't have a good distinction between one half of the sentence and the half on the other end of the semicolon in the sentence. So this one doesn't make sense either. This next answer choice, sorry, that is supposed to be me crossing that out. The next answer choice, as a small child, Jeff disowned his stringent upbringing. So he has the power then to reject the upbringing and to not be associated with it. However, as a successful young man, he began to appreciate his father's strict liberation or freedom. Doesn't really make sense. First of all, strict liberation in the context of upbringing doesn't make much sense, because when you think of strict upbringing, you think of there being little freedom, and you can't really disown the way that you're brought up. So that doesn't make sense. And shunned his stringent upbringing would make potential sense, but then appreciate his father's strict regalia has absolutely no relation to his upbringing. So this has to be the right answer. I hope that helped with this problem. Happy prepping!